Welcome back. I'm Connie from Let's Go Crafting, and today we're going to make this cute little elephant. Let's go see what we need for supplies. So you will need the pattern, which is in a link. You can click the link in the description of this YouTube video. You will need fabric for your elephant. You can use anything. This is a scrap from my scrap bin. If you don't have fabric, you can use an old t-shirt, sheets, a pillowcase. Pretty much anything will work. You'll need some felt for your elephant's ears. You'll need a couple of buttons for his eyes. You're gonna need either embroidery floss or kind of a thinner yarn for the tail. I decided to use this yarn because I just have it laying around. I thought I'd use what I have. You'll need paper scissors to cut out your pattern. You'll need fabric scissors to cut out your fabric. And you're going to need a small bit of stuffing. You don't have to have stuffing from the store or from a bag. You can use dryer lint. You can use old t-shirts that you've cut into strips. If you've saved some of your old fabric strips or, you know, the little clippings off your yarn, you can use that. You can pretty much use anything. This elephant can be sewn by hand. It can also be sewn on the machine. So either way, you'll need a needle and thread. And let's get started. So after you have your pattern, we're going to cut it out from our piece of paper. We're going to use our paper scissors. We never want to use our fabric scissors on our paper. It will make them dull and then they won't cut our fabric as well. When we're cutting, we use our cutting hand needs to be in a comfortable position. I like to cut like this. Your other hand that's not cutting is the one that's going to hold the paper and rotate the paper. When you're cutting, you don't want to rotate the cutting hand around because that's uncomfortable. So what we do is we use our cutting hand to cut, and then we use our paper holding hand to turn. So in this case, my cutting hand is my right hand, and my hand that's taking care of turning the paper so I can cut is my left hand. Now, if you are left-handed, you're going to be holding your scissors in your left hand, and you're going to be turning your paper with your right hand. Okay, so I have the ear of the elephant cut out. I will join you as soon as I have the elephant cut out. All right, so here I have my pattern cut out. I have the pattern for the elephant and the pattern for the ear. The ear we're going to cut out of felt, so I'm going to set that aside for a moment. And the elephant I'm going to cut out of fabric. Excuse me. This is the fabric I've chosen for my elephant, and I need 2 pieces. Fabric has a right side and a wrong side. The right side of your fabric is typically the brighter side, and the wrong side of the fabric is the darker side. It's interesting, both sides of this fabric I really, really like. So I'm going to cut my elephant out and then decide later which I'm going to use for the outside and which I'm going to use for the inside. Because I want to cut 2 pieces of this pattern, and I want them to come out exactly the same size, I'm going to fold my fabric so that I have 2 layers, and I'm going to pin my elephant to my fabric, to both layers of fabric, so that when I cut, I'm cutting the 2 pieces at the same time. So I have my pins here, and I'm going to come in from the edge and stick my pin into the fabric. It goes through the pattern, through both layers of fabric, and then it comes right back up into your pattern, okay? You want to be careful when you're pinning that your pin does not extend. Let me show you. Does not extend. This pin is not quite as sharp as they usually are. Let's see if I can make it, or I think I have to choose a different pin. So sometimes if you're pinning, your pin will extend beyond the edge of your pattern. If that happens, when you're trying to cut, it becomes a problem. You don't want to cut over the pin. You don't want to cut your pin with your scissors. So if we always make sure that our pins stay inside the edge of our pattern, then it works well. I'm just going to put a few pins in. Just basically all you're doing is holding your pattern to your fabric so you can cut it out without having the pattern or the fabric slip around too much. Some of my pins seem to be bent, but I think I can still use them anyway. Okay, there's that. And one more. I think I need one more. That's too much pattern. All right. And now when we cut out our pattern, we're going to do this exactly the same way as we did when we cut the paper. My cutting hand holds the scissors. My turning hand turns the fabric. So that's the hand that is not holding the scissors. When I cut, I'm going to cut right on outside the edge of my pattern. So it looks, I'm pretty close to the edge of my pattern, so I'm getting a true shape, but I'm not cutting the paper itself. My turning hand seems to be doing a great job keeping up with my cutting hand. If it wasn't, I would just go slower. I would cut slower so that my turning hand could keep up. When you get to these strange shapes, sometimes it's hard to go all the way around and get a good cut. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll come in again from here and start cutting the other way. And that'll make it easier. Also, cutting off some of the extra can make it easier as well. My cutting hand is still doing a good job, holding my pattern, turning my fabric, and there. I've cut around the trunk. I have a little bit that's not right, so I just trim it off. And now I'm gonna cut the feet out. So I'm just gonna keep going around. If it's not perfect, it doesn't matter. If your cutting is a little jagged, it also doesn't matter. Remember, everything that we sew is going to be on the inside of a seam, so you won't see a lot of it. So now we have the elephant cut. I'm going to set him aside. And I'm going to set this fabric aside. And now we need 4 pieces of felt for the ear. The reason we need 4 pieces is you have 2 ears, and each ear has 2 sides because we're going to stuff them. When I'm cutting anything that has more than 2 pieces, I cut 2 at a time. So we have my felt that I've folded over, and I would lay my pattern here and cut it out, and my pattern here and cut it out. I'll join you after I have my ears cut out. Okay, so now we have all 4 ears cut out. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I did cut them 2 at a time. I just have them connected all together so I don't lose them. And we have our elephant. We have 2 pieces for the elephant. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our tail. I chose to do my tail out of this yellow yarn that I had laying around. And you're going to need 3 pieces of it that are 8 inches long. And I did have the end undone here somewhere. Here it is. So you can use yarn, you can use embroidery floss, thread, that's a little tiny. So I'm just going to cut 3 pieces that are approximately 8 inches long. So I have the first piece cut, and then I can just use that as my measuring tool. And again, it's just an estimate. This is more than what you will need. I'm going to put my yarn aside and my measuring tape aside. So now I have my 3 pieces, and I need to braid these. So I'm going to take the top part and I'm going to make an overhand knot. So I grab the 3 pieces and I'm going to wrap them around my finger like that. And it creates a little loop. And I'm going to just take these ends and put them through the loop. So I'm making a knot. When I pull tight, I'm going to move my knot with my fingers so it's close to the end of my threads. So my knot will be about there. And now I'm gonna braid this. So for those of you who know how to braid, go ahead and braid. For those that don't, I'm going to tape this down to the table and I'm going to show you how to braid. So we have 3 strings here. Okay, we have the right string, the middle string, and the left string. The first step is you take your right string, bring it over the middle string, and set it down. So now the right string has become the middle string and the middle string has become the right string. Then we take our left string, bring it over the middle and set it down. So now our left string has become the middle and our middle string has become the left string. And we keep doing that over and over. So the right over the middle, and then the left over the middle, and then you'll want to cinch it up a little bit. Just kind of tighten it. And then you'll take your right over the middle and your left over the middle. And you're going to keep doing that until you're about maybe an inch from the end. And I'll join you at that point. All right, now my tail is all braided. I think that's about the right length for the tail. I can check it if I want. So the tail will go here. And do I want it that long? Do I want it shorter? I think I like a long tail. So when you get your tail the length that you want, you're going to stop and you're going to do another overhand knot. You want your overhand knot to come to the very end of your braid. So you're going to wrap your yarn around and you're going to make sure all your ends go through the loop. And then you're just going to pull. And you can see that my braid ends here and my knot is coming up here farther away from the end of the braid. So all I'm going to do is hold on to my ends like that and then push my knot to where I want it to be. And now my knot is right at the end of my little braid. And I can trim all those extras off. And there's my little elephant tail. Okay, so now we have all the pieces to our elephant. We've got the ear, the fabric for the elephant, the tail, and the first thing we're going to do in assembling our elephant is we're going to put the eyes on. And we're going to use a needle and thread. So let's take the pattern off of our fabric. Now when I take my pins out, I always put them back onto my pin cushion. This one's magnetic. If I had a pin cushion where you just stuck the pins in, I would just put them away right away. When we leave them on the table, they tend to roll around. And then sometimes they roll on the floor and then we can step on them. But if we put them back in our pin cushions, they're there for us to find the next time we need them. So I'm going to take my pattern off. And now I really have to decide which side of this fabric do I want to be on the outside. I think I'm going to choose this one because I like the contrast between the orange and the green. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our eye on, and your elephant has two eyes, the eye for the front and the eye for the back. So I'm going to put my eye about right there. The placement, the dot is the placement. So you can lay your pattern onto your fabric, lift up, and place it exactly where the dot says, or you can just eyeball it. So we're going to use a needle and thread for this. To measure out your thread, you will grab the end of your thread between your thumb and your index finger, and you will measure it. Mine's not pulling. I had the wrong end. I'm going to grab it between my thumb and my index finger, and I'm going to pull it so that my arm is straight. And then this side goes to my shoulder. And then this is exactly where I'm going to cut my thread. It's right there. Now I typically just use any little needle that's around my house. A sewing needle for fabric has a sharp end, and it has a hole in the needle, which is called the eye of the needle, that is big enough for your thread to go through. So I stick the thread through the needle and I pull, and then I match up both ends. And there we go. Those two ends are matched. So I'm going to lay the ends on my index finger and hold them with my thumb. Then I'm going to wrap the thread around my finger so that it overlaps the ends, kind of like an X. And then you just roll off the end of your finger, grab the thread and pull down. And now you have a nice knot. Now it's time to sew on our button. Now my button has 4 holes. I can choose to have my holes like that, where they're horizontal. I can also choose to have them like that, which is how I think I'm going to have them. So I'm going to pick up my elephant. I'm going to hold the button where I want it, and I'm going to come to the back. I come to the back because I want the knot at the back. And when you're trying to get your button, your needle into your button, you have to kind of fish around. And if you don't get it right the first time, don't get frustrated. Be gentle on yourself until it comes through that hole. Just be careful you don't poke yourself. So then you pull your thread. And now if you notice, my knot is on the back. And that's going to be hidden when I'm done with the elephant. So I'm going to take my thread. I came up in this hole. I'm going to go down in this hole, straight across. There we go. And I'm going to do that one more time. Oops, I came out here. Darn. All right, let's find the hole. That's the right hole. And I'm going to go back down. So I did it 2 times in those 2 holes. And now I'm going to do it 2 times in the other 2 holes. So now I'm trying to find the other hole. And I'm just going to keep, pushing with my needle till I find the hole in the button. I come up on one, down on the other, and I do it again. Oops, didn't come out in the right spot. So now I'm going to try again. let's see. Here we go. Once I've done it twice in all the buttonholes, I can come to the back and make my knot. I'm going to turn it over. I'm just going to go put my needle under one of the stitches that I can see. Pull the thread. Then I'm going to do it one more time. And now I have a little loop. So I'm going to take my needle and go into the loop from the front to the back. And I'm going to do that again. And then I'm just going to pull tight. And now my knot is right near the edge of my fabric, right flush. We have to bury our thread because if we cut our thread right close to the knot, it tends to come out. So I'm just going to put my needle in right next to my knot and come out somewhere else. I'm just going to turn it over and make sure it doesn't show on the front side. It does not. So now I'm going to pull and I'm going to cut. We're going to do the same thing with the other button. So as soon as I've gotten our other button sewn on, I'll be back. Okay, so now we have both the eyes on our elephant. Now we want to sew him together. Remember, we made the tail, so we have to make sure that we have the tail on the inside, and I'll show you why. So when you pin something and you have a tail or you have some ears or something like that, it has to be on the inside. And you might think, how is that going to work? I'll show you how it works. So right now we just have the starting knot and the rest of the tail is on the inside, right? So once we sew the seam, we'll turn our elephant right side out. Once we turn him right side out, there's his tail. And that's why the tail has to go on the inside when we're sewing him together. Okay, so on your pattern you have a tail placement line. So you're going to make sure that your tail is coming out right by that line, right by that dot, okay? And you're going to pin him. So I'm going to make sure my pin is close to the edge of my fabric, and I'm going to go into the yarn. So if you can see, the pin is in the fabric, in the yarn, in the back fabric, and now I'm going to turn my needle so it comes right back out again. And now it's holding that in. Now let's take a look at our pattern again. There are some other markings on here. There is a little line here and a line here. And it says leave open to stuff. So when we sew our elephant, we are going to sew the whole thing except for right here. Right here, we're going to not have any stitching at all. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin here. I'm going to put my pattern back on. And I'm going to put a pin right here. And now I'm going to continue pinning all the way around. You want to make sure when you're pinning that your fabric is even. You don't want it to be separated like that. Even, so together. And we're going to pin all the way around. I'll be right back after I'm done pinning. Okay, our elephant is mostly pinned. I wanted to point something out to you. So you know how we have our tail pinned right here? Well, if you look in, here's our tail over here. We have to be really careful when we're sewing around that we don't also sew our tail to the other side of the elephant. That would look kind of funny. So what I do is I just push the tail farther away from the edge of my elephant. So I'm going to finish pinning. And now we remember we're not gonna sew right here. So the way I remember that is I give myself a visual cue, And I put 2 pins in that go on both sides of where I'm not going to sew. So most of the time I just pin with 1 pin. When I see 2 pins, that tells me, oh, stop, you must do something different. And that tells me, okay, what am I really doing? And I don't want to sew here. That's what I'm doing. Okay, so this elephant can be sewn by hand. If you're going to sew by hand, you're going to use the running stitch. I've put a knot in here. I just, just like I showed you for putting on the buttons. So here's where our pins are to start. We're going to start pretty close to the edge, like maybe 1/4 or 1/8 away. Probably 1/4 of an inch away. We're going to come up. We're going to go slightly to the left. Oops, I got stuck on my pins. Let's pull that out. That will happen periodically. Now see, you have a stitch. Your stitch should be about between 1/8 and 1/4 inch long. Then you're going to come up again to the left of your stitch. The space in between your stitches should also be 1/8 or 1/4. So the length of your stitch should be the same as the length of the gap, and then the next stitch should be the same. So you're going to do that. If you're sewing by hand, you're going to do this stitch all the way around. Okay? When you get back to here, you're going to do your knot. Now, if you use up all your thread and you need new thread, you just knot wherever your thread has ended, and then you rethread your needle and you keep going. Okay, I am going to now take my elephant to the sewing machine and show you how to do it by on the machine. I'll see you when I get there. Here we are at the sewing machine. We're going to put our fabric onto the sewing machine right where our 2 pins are. And then we're going to lower our presser foot. I never sew over my pins, so I'm going to take those out and put them on my pin cushion. And I'm going to start sewing. Now, if you're sewing by hand, you already have a knot and your threads will not pull out. For us on the sewing machine, we have to do a reverse stitch. So my reverse stitch is up here, and I just hold it down. I'll take a couple stitches backwards, and then I'll keep going forwards. Now, you're going to notice there's some curves, and those are a bit tricky. When I'm going around curves, I don't always use my foot pedal. What I do is I come till I'm close to the edge, and then I come over here to my knob, and I use the knob to do some sewing. Okay, now let's come back over to the needle. So see how my presser foot is coming off of my fabric? Now's the time where I'm going to rotate my fabric. So I lift my presser foot, making sure my needle is in my fabric, rotate my fabric, set the presser foot down, and see how I'm right on the edge of my fabric again? Then I'm going to come back over here, and let's see what the needle does as I'm rolling the knob. Now, you always roll the knob towards you. See how it controls your needle, and see how it's sewing by itself. See how the fabric is moving forward? All right, now we're ready to rotate our fabric again because we're coming off. So we lift our presser foot, we rotate our fabric just a little bit. I come back over. I'm going to do some hand sewing on the machine. Lift my presser foot, come down, and I'm going to keep doing that all the way around these curves. When I get to here, I'll probably sew just a few stitches on the sewing machine with the foot pedal. But when I get back to this curve, I'm going to go back to doing it, turning that knob. And I'm going to do the knob probably all the way around his trunk because I really want it to come out nicely. Then when I get to about here, this curve is much more gradual. I'll be able to control that on the machine, and I'll just sew all the way to my stopping point. Okay, I'll see you as soon as I'm done sewing. So here I am. We've sewn all the way around our elephant. We should have a little opening that we haven't sewn. I've trimmed my threads, and now I want to look at my seam allowances. My seam allowances should be about 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Right here I'm noticing there's a little bit of bulk, and right here we have a curve. So what we're going to do with our fabric scissors is we're going to trim our seam at the trunk, the end of the trunk, so that it's pretty close to the edge. You don't want to cut through your stitching. And here, to get rid of bulk, we're going to do something that's called clipping our curves. So we make a little slit in our fabric that cuts through the fabric but not through our stitching. So we're just going to put a few little slits in there. Now, let's say you accidentally cut through your seam line. What happens then is you wind up with a little hole. But never fear, you can fix that. You can fix that by hand. So you'll just take a couple little stitches on the outside to close up your hole, and you'll be perfectly fine. So I trimmed out here, and here's another curve that goes in. This one looks like I'll probably only need 1 clip. There we go. Now it's time to turn him right side out. So we're going to open up the elephant, and we're going to turn him. It's like turning a pair of socks. If you're having trouble, because sometimes these little pieces will have trouble turning, when you stick your finger in, you really try and get the farthest places first. So I'm sticking the trunk into the rest of my elephant, like that. And then I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to push all that out the hole. And you just have to be patient, and you just have to keep working it, because eventually it'll turn itself right side out. I picked some pretty thick fabric. There we go. Here it comes. Just gonna pull it, work it, pull it and work it, and eventually it'll turn right side out. Oh, I see an eye. Don't pull on the eyes though. If you pull on the eyes, you might accidentally pull one off. If that happens, no big deal, because guess what? You can sew them on again. Now you have to push your trunk out, and I am using the stick to push my trunk out. And if you're having trouble with that, you can just pull it out bit by bit, like that. So you just reach in and pull it out. Okay, so I'm going to work on this, and as soon as I have everything turned right side out, then we'll talk about how we're going to stuff it and what we're going to do with the ears. Be back in just a minute. All right, so I've gotten him right side out. I had to use my stick, and I had to, push it through and get the trunk out. Then I used the edge of the stick, and I pushed it, I just ran it along the seam line to make sure everything was pushed out. So here's our elephant. Here's the opening that we're gonna stuff with. And here's our stuffing. And I think at the beginning of the video I said you could pretty much use anything. Dryer lint, scraps of fabric, scraps of thread and yarn. I'm gonna use this because I have it. Now you could just shove wads in here, but then your elephant will be a little bit lumpy. So I usually take off little bits and I separate them out a little bit, and then I stuff them in. A trick to getting this stuffed, don't stuff this first. Start way down here, and you can get it in with your finger and a stick. And the stick can be a chopstick. This stick happened to come in with my stuffing bag, but I've used the end of a pencil, the eraser end, anything like that will work. And so we just keep stuffing until he's pretty firm. And I'm going to get more down into the trunk. His trunk is pretty firm, so now I can start working onto the head. So the way I'm going to stuff this is I started at the trunk, and I'm going to stuff all the way here, and then I'm going to get some bits down into the feet. I'll be back as soon as the elephant is stuffed. Okay, so the elephant is stuffed pretty firmly. The trunk is very firm, so it's not going to bend. I've got stuffing in the feet, and now we have to close up the hole. Now I'm going to look at my stuffing a little bit, and I seem to have, I need a little bit more, otherwise he's going to be a little floppy right here. So let's just get a little bit more stuffing, and we'll fill up his back. There we go. And now we're going to hand sew this shut. If you notice, the raw edge never looks very nice. So you fold that in like a seam, and you match up the two sides of the fabric. And then we put a pin in. I always use pins. Pins make my fabric behave. It makes it stay where I need it to stay, which is right there. And now I'm going to get my needle and thread again. This is the leftover, and I need another knot. So my ends are even. I'm going to grab them with my finger, wrap my thread around till I get next, and then roll it off the end and pull down, just like that. Okay? Now, I don't want my knot to show on either side of my elephant. So if I were to start like that, the knot would be on this side of the elephant. So instead, what I do, this is our hole that we're closing up, is right here. I take my needle and I go into the hole, and I come up a little beyond. So here's where the hole starts, and I come up a little bit before the hole starts. And I'm going to pull my thread. And then I'm going to tuck my end in, and then no knot, no end shows. The stitch I'm going to show you now is called the ladder stitch, and once you've done it, you can't really see it, which is what I'm going for here. So if you notice, you've got a fold of fabric on this side of the seam and a fold of fabric on that side of the seam. Your thread is coming out of this fold, the top. So you're going to go straight across like the rung on a ladder, straight across to this fold, stick your needle into the fold, slide it down a little bit, and it comes out the same fold. Then you pull your thread, and there's your stitch. And when you pull it tight, it disappears. So now my thread is coming out of the fold farther away from me, I come straight across to the fold closest to me, and I go down into the push the needle in. I pull my thread. If it gets stuck on your elephant, you just rearrange it and you pull it tight and they disappear. So you can sew this closed any way you want. This is the way I'm gonna do it. So as soon as he's closed, my hole is all closed, I'll meet you over here and show you how to knot it. Here we've done our seam. See how you can't see any of the stitches? I've pulled them tight, they've disappeared, and now I'm going to do my ending knot. I'm just going to take a tiny little stitch into the fabric. I'm going to pull it tight, and I'm going to take another stitch. And this time, I'm only going to pull until I have a little loop. And my threads have separated. If you can see how they're all separated. To get them together, you just pull one or the other of these. And there you go. So I'm going to go in through the loop in front to back one time, and then a second time, and then I'm going to pull it tight. And now my knot is right on my fabric. If I were to cut my thread right now, the knot will eventually come undone. So I'm just going to stick my needle right next to the knot, and then I'm going to bring it out somewhere else. Anywhere else works. A little bit away. And then you pull tight. And now you can just cut that off. The last step is going to be to sew the ears together and to stuff them. I'm going to knot my thread just to get ready for that. And we've done that a couple times now, so I'm sure, I have faith, I'm sure we can do it. There's my knot. I'm going to just stick it here so I don't lose it. So now it's time to take the pins out of the ear and to take our pattern off. And felt really doesn't have a wrong side or a right side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all the way around in the running stitch, this curved part. I'm not going to knot my thread. I'm going to leave it, just leave it down and stuff my ear and then finish with a running stitch. So I will meet you after my running stitches are done. Okay, we've sewn all the way around the curved side of the elephant's ear. We haven't knotted it off. Now we're going to open it up a little, and we're just going to put a little bit of stuffing in there just to give it a little bit of body, a little bit of poof. We don't want to put too much stuffing in because then I think it'll be too big. So I just put a teeny tiny little bit. You saw how much. You can use stuffing or anything. Once you have your stuffing back in, then you just keep sewing. And you're still going to use that good old running stitch back and forth until you're done. After you're done with this ear, then you're going to do this ear the exact same way. And I will meet you back here when your second ear is done. See you then. All right, so both our ears are done. We're just about finished with our elephant. The next step is just to attach it to the elephant. And I'm just gonna figure out, I don't want it in the middle of the body. I want it closer to the head. That looks pretty good. So I have pre-threaded my needle, but you know how to do that now. And now we're just gonna pin this or sew this on. I'm gonna start at one end. I'm gonna come up from the bottom because I don't want my knot to show. And I'm just gonna have a stitch in the ear. I'm gonna take a stitch in the elephant, a small stitch right close to the edge of the ear, just like that. So now my thread is coming from my elephant. So I'm going to come right up into the ear, right along my stitching line. That's where I'm going to come up, is right where my stitching line was. Okay, so now I'm coming out of the ear. So now I go back into the elephant. I take a little stitch in the elephant. And now I take a little stitch in my ear. And I do that until I'm done attaching the ear. Once I'm done attaching the ear, we'll make another little knot, just like we did when we were sewing on the button, same as when we were sewing our elephant together, and the same as when we made our ears. When you're done with this ear, then you'll sew this ear onto the other side. I'll see you as soon as the ears are done. And here's our finished elephant. Such a cutie. Look at that. Cute little tail, cute little ears, cute little eyes. I hope you have enjoyed this craft. I'll see you next time.